Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Anthony. I'm an alcoholic and drug addict. And I'm going to do an introduction today to Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't speak for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm just a member. So anything I say, I'm not associated with Alcoholics Anonymous as a program. So I want to start off on the preface of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it says, because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists a strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. And it says basic text. Now, this is a textbook, not meant to be read, but meant to be studied. And it says, therefore, the first portion of this volume, describing the AA recovery program, has been left largely untouched in the course of revisions made for the second, third, and fourth edition. The section called The Doctor's Opinion has been kept intact just as it was originally written in 1939 by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, our society's great medical benefactor.
I'm Marianne, and I'm an alcoholic. And one of the things that jumps out of me on that is when it says it's a basic text, that gives me hope, because when I walked into these rooms, I was unsure of how to work this program. And basic text was something I could understand, and I relate that to something like an algebra book. If I went to an algebra class, I would not open the back of the book to try to learn algebra. I would begin at the beginning. And Alcoholics Anonymous in our big book is laid out in just that manner, so that we begin at the start of the book and we learn about this disease and we learn how to live with this disease successfully.
And I'm going to jump to page Roman numeral 13, the foreword to the first edition. And it says, this is the foreword as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. It says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I'm not recovered from alcoholism. What I'm recovered from is that seemingly hopeless state of mind and body I was in when I was in my addiction, thinking I was going nowhere, life had no meaning, I didn't think I'd live past 35. And the book says, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So I looked up that word precisely, and it means exactly, specifically, and just. Not meant to be added to or subtracted from. It says what it says. There's no other interpretation for me in this book. It says, for them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person, and besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all. And I'm going to go to the doctor's opinion. That word epoch there means a period of time made special by something or someone. So I took my little dictionary and I looked up the words I didn't understand so I could help others understand them as we were going through the book. And it says, the physician who at our request gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. These things were true to some extent, in fact to a considerable extent with some of us, but we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may of course mean little, but as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. And that word allergy, I looked it up, and it says an abnormal reaction. So when I took a drink, I had an abnormal reaction. My body wanted more. A normal person takes one or two drinks and they go, whoa, I'm out of control. I take one or two drinks, I feel in control. So that's an abnormal reaction. And it says, though we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as an altruistic plane, we favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. I like that word, befogged. I think that's where I was in the program. More often than not, it is imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached, as he has then a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. So I know for me, anytime I've tried to speak with someone who was high or drunk, it just was a waste of time. And the same thing was true of me before I came in. People tried to talk to me when I was in my addiction, and I didn't even hear it. It didn't even go in the first year. So that's why it says that more often than not, it is imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached.
One of the things that jumps out at me here in the doctor's opinion is that he's providing to me the proper information to self-diagnose myself. And the interesting thing was when he talked about that allergy, I always recognized that when I drank, I behaved differently from most of the crowd I was around, at least in the beginning, before I found my pack of alcoholics to hang out with. But the having this proper information is the beginning of the start of the new life that this program promises. Diagnosing myself, knowing this comes from the medical community, knowing that it's my mind and my body that are quite different. So this information he's giving us here is really vital to decide whether we're in the right rooms if we have this problem. And he goes on to explain more.
And the doctor writes, "The subject presented in this book seems to me to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with alcoholic addiction. I say this after many years' experience as medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country treating alcoholic and drug addiction. There was therefore a sense of real satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on a subject which is covered in such masterly detail in these pages. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. What with our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge." And this is the doctor humbling himself, saying that he really doesn't understand the whole thing. He knows that the body and mind was sick, but here he is humbling himself, saying that we're not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital, and while here, he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. And this really gets me. He said later he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgivings, we consented. Now, I can't imagine a head doctor at a big hospital giving some drunk the privilege to talk to some of the patients. I can't imagine what the other doctors said to him. I mean, that's why it says, and with some misgivings. I'm sure some of the other doctors brought, "Doc, what are you doing letting this guy speak to our patients?" But here he goes on, he says, "The cases we have followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has belabored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. They believe in themselves, and still more in a power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death." Of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor, and this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be of maximum benefit. And this next paragraph is what we all have in common. It says, "We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve." So I'd like to go to the board at this time and show what an obsession is. Okay, so the doctor gives us the obsession and the phenomenon of craving, physical craving he talked about. The reason we're different than people who don't have a problem with addiction is we think about it. A normal person doesn't think about getting drunk or high. They may say, "Gee, I think I'll have a drink." And if they have the second one, they go, ooh, I'm out of control. We take 1 or 2 drinks, we feel in control. So we think about it, we play with the thought, it becomes what's called a mental obsession. And when that happens, I'm in trouble because I can't get rid of an obsession. I'm going to act on it at some point. Maybe not today, tomorrow, next week, next month, but it's coming. All action is born of thought. We'll learn that as we read the book. So once I put it in, it becomes physical. You don't crave anything until it's in your body physically. You obsess about it. So I looked up the word obsession, and it says, an act of a spirit in possessing or ruling a person. The fact or state of being obsessed with an idea to get drunk or high, a desire to get drunk or high, or an emotion. When I'm in my addiction, I'm either way up here or way down there. I'm never on a balance. It says such a persistent idea, desire, or emotion, one that cannot be gotten rid of by reasoning. Now, many people told me I had a problem. And I used to say to them, if you don't get off my back, you're going to have a big problem. Leave me alone. I'm only hurting myself. I wish I had a nickel for every time I said that. But this helped me understand what that obsession was, and that I couldn't get rid of the obsession on my own. My mind kept going back at it, and my mind refused that I couldn't take a drink or a drug in safety.
The paragraph before, when you talk about an alcoholic got to be free from his physical craving for liquor, and this often requires a definite hospital procedure, is still really valid today, especially with some of the substances we have. People's lives are in danger, and oftentimes as you learn more about the program, we do something called 12-step work, where we'll go out and we'll actually meet with someone who perhaps knows nothing about this program, who may still be drinking, and they are really in the height of their alcoholism. And those people, sometimes it can be extremely dangerous for them to try to just detox in their home or by themselves. People are known to have died from the DTs, died from aspirating their vomit. We've had actual cases in our little town where people have gone out to do a 12-step call and the person has refused, and within a day they were found no longer with us. They were deceased. And so we have to be really careful when we're approaching someone to give them the proper information. It's not okay just to not drink. And that starts with the doctor giving us this first warning that oftentimes there needs to be some medical intervention just for health reasons and safety, and to give that person a little time for the fog to clear from their mind. So keep that in mind when you're going out to speak to someone who may know a little bit about the program and may not know anything about the program. That it's never wrong to suggest that perhaps they need to detox safely.
The book says, frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. And this is important because the message which can interest these people must have depth and weight. That means I have an advantage over some of the professional counselors or whatever because I lived it. If you're not a real alcoholic and drug addict, you have a problem relating with people who have had that experience. And a good example is people who have never been incarcerated say, well, I read this book on incarceration last month. Let me tell you what it's like to be locked up. Well, if they've never had the experience, it's hard for them to identify. And that's why we have problems sometimes with people who can't identify. And then it goes on to say, if any feel that as psychiatrists directing a hospital for alcoholics, we appear somewhat sentimental, let them stand with us a while on the firing line. See the tragedies, the despairing wives, the little children. Let the solving of these problems become a part of their daily work and even of their sleeping moments. And the most cynical will not wonder that we have accepted and encouraged this movement. We feel after many years of experience that we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up among them. And that's the doctor humbling himself, saying that these guys, these alcoholics, found a way out which they couldn't find because they didn't have the experience we had. And he talks about the despairing wives, the little children. Let the solving of these problems be a part of their daily work. So it's kind of difficult, to not know that unless you live there, and the doctor's humbling himself there, which was very important to us in Alcoholics Anonymous.
The good news this book brings me at this point is that now it's given me a good idea of what exactly is wrong with me, why I have these problems, why when I drink I can't control the amount I drink. But here the doctor gives me my first glimpse at the hope. The idea that I could recreate my life never occurred to me, had never been explained to me, never even thought it possible. I thought my character as it was by the time I found these doors in my 20s was of a liar, a thief, and a cheat, and that's just who I was in this life. I had no idea that I could grow and develop and change those character defects into assets and learn how to live successfully in the world with other people. And this is the news. The doctor's finally bringing it to me, that he's not only going to tell me what's been wrong with me from a medical point of view, but he's also giving me the first glimpse of a solution, which is what this program is based on, is finding a solution how to live successfully within our society.
Many men and women who are incarcerated are sitting in there talking about how good it was, how things were. I had this, I had that, and they're romancing the very thing that got them locked up. You know, the mind is a wonderful thing. It likes to repeat success. It talks about it a little later in the book. It mentions a hot stove. Now, if you touched a hot stove as a young person, what happened? You never touch it again, not on purpose anyway. Why? Only pain associated with the stove. But with drugs or alcohol, we had fun. I hope you had fun. I had a little fun. But then to have fun, I have to put something in, so I become reliant and dependent on it. And the mind is a wonderful thing. I think I have to do it to have fun. So the mind goes to the success I had in my addiction rather than the pain of losing the wife, the kids, being incarcerated, or whatever it was, losing everything, the house and everything. So this is an important part of the book. You know, the mind is a wonderful thing. It likes to repeat success. So it says, if any feel that as psychiatrists directing a hospital for alcoholics, we appear somewhat sentimental, let them stand with us a while on the firing line. See the tragedies, the despairing wives, the little children. Let the solving of these problems become a part of their daily work and even of their sleeping moments. And the most cynical will not wonder that we have accepted and encouraged this movement. We feel after many years of experience that we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up among them. And it says, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. I liked it. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. And that's what happened to me. I hung around with people who did what I did. If you weren't drinking and drugging, I didn't hang around with you unless you were buying. And then once your money was gone, you got to go. It says they are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks.
I particularly like that first sentence of the last paragraph. Men and women who drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. And I always thought that I was drinking because I just thought it made me social, it made me easier to be friendly. What I didn't realize is from the very beginning I was trying to change the way I was feeling. I thought, well, I'll just relax and kick back. And what I came to believe and understand through this program is that I wanted to relax and kick back because I couldn't deal with the emotions of life. I wasn't relaxing and kicking back. I was escaping from those emotions that I was having, those life situations that I didn't know how to handle, that I was uncomfortable being in. And so I was using alcohol as a way to change the way I was feeling and not dealing with life situations. So one of the things this program has taught me is to grow up and recognize what I'm feeling, and that alcohol was my solution to my problems. I thought it was my solution to my problems. What it turned out to be was I had living issues, and it was those living issues that I was trying to treat with the alcohol. So through this program, putting the alcohol aside, I've had to learn how to live with my living issues and use a different manner of living. And that's what this book is going to bring us into more information about.
I'll never do that again. We sing that all the time. But going back to when we first started, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. One gentleman said, on a hot day down here in Texas, I like the taste of ice cold beer. But he also said, on a hot day like this, I love the taste of cold mountain spring water, but I never drank a case of water, and because he didn't get the effect from it. But that's why we drank. I drank because I liked what it did for me. It did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And as time went on, I felt I couldn't have fun without it. I couldn't hang out or be this or do that or go to school. So I had to put something in. My self-reliance had failed me. And then as I start getting worse, things happen. You know, it talks about in the book the difference between an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic is a non-alcoholic will give up his behaviors to meet his goals, but an alcoholic will give up his goals to meet his behaviors. And that was me. As my life started getting worse, I started drinking for a different reason. I started to drink not to feel. And that was the difference. And as it kept progressing, the worse I got, the more I drank, because now I didn't want to be in my own skin.
One of the things this book drives home is the need for sponsorship, and the doctor, as he's talking about these things, and as we're getting in, he mentioned a paragraph or so before, those few simple rules to follow. Those are our 12 steps in this program, and the 12 steps are meant to be gone through with a sponsor, someone who has done the 12 steps before, is putting those into action in their life. And one of the easiest ways when we come in, you should try to find a sponsor almost immediately, but it was suggested to me that I find a temporary sponsor just in case things didn't work out personality-wise with that person. I could still start doing the 12 steps, but then I could go on and find someone that I could absolutely relate to. We have an excellent pamphlet on questions and answers on sponsorship, and I recommend that anybody who's coming into the program for the first time get a hold of this pamphlet through our intergroup office or through some of the meetings you're going to, or if you're incarcerated, they may not have them in there. Ask a volunteer to bring them in or get them for you. And a lot of these are also online if you have access to online. But one of the reasons, there's many reasons we have a sponsor. And most importantly is to guide us through this big book, page by page, word by word, explaining what it is, show us how to implement these steps into our daily walk in life. But also, many of us in the beginning will try to do these 12 steps. Well, I'll just do them by myself because I'm not going to share anything with anyone else. And the biggest rule that was taught to me is I can't heal a sick mind with a sick mind. I can convince myself of almost anything inside my head if I'm living there by myself. And a sponsor is just a really good person that you can bounce your thoughts off of, get confirmation or comments on what you might be thinking and how your thinking is relating to what the book and the solution in the book is all about. So I highly recommend that, once you get into the program, make a decision that you check out that book, Questions and Answers on Sponsorship.
The book says, I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I've had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal which was to be settled on a certain date favorably to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. And that's real important, because if you don't understand the problem, you can't seek a solution. It's like any problem. My stomach hurts. I don't know what it is. I can take all kinds of stuff, or I can go to a doctor and say, Doc, can you check me out? And he's going to look for something and find the problem. But until I understand what the problem is, I cannot seek a solution. And that's very important in here. So it says, there are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than to continue to fight. The supreme sacrifice, we know, is death.
It's a big warning.
The classification of alcoholics seems to be most difficult, and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, type 1, the psychopaths, who are emotionally unstable. We are all familiar with this type. They are always going on the wagon for keeps. They are over-remorseful, make many resolutions, but never a decision. Type 2. There is the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment, the geographical cure. Type 3, and this is real important for people who are incarcerated. There is the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. That's real important. Type 4, there is the manic depressive type, who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. Type 5, then there are types entirely normal in every respect, excepting the effect alcohol has upon them. They are often able, intelligent, friendly people. All these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. So that's real important. You know, I had to find a way to stop and to stay stopped. I could always stop, but I couldn't stop starting again. So in this book, it helped me understand a way to live one day at a time. And that was a big thing for me. When I came in, I said, I can never drink a drug again. They said, no, you just can't drink a drug today. And I said, wow. And they said, can you make the day? I said, I think so. And they said, we'll help you. And they did. You know, when I first came in, people said, no one better than you sitting in this room. I thought they were crazy. And then they said, we'll love you till you can love yourself. And they meant it. And as they started talking, they were talking about me. They never told me what to do. They told me what they did. And that helped me. Because if they told me, you got to do this and do that, and you got to listen to her, and he's the boss, I'd have said, see you later, and I'd have walked out. But they didn't do that. You know, and that's what I loved about this program. There was no big I's or little U's. Everyone has one day. And if you ask my sponsor, how much sobriety you got? He'd say, what times you get up this morning? If you get up before me and didn't have a drink or a drug, you got more than me today. And that's great because it keeps all of us on an even keel.
This is such an important part of the book because particularly where it starts with, you know, the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. I don't know of anyone who is in this program that hasn't been around for a while that doesn't know those folks that just didn't make it through and have passed away, and that's a stark reminder that there's always that opportunity if I relapse into my alcoholism that I too could be one of them. But one of the things where he talks about these types and classifications of alcoholics, you know, you want to look in there and find where you can identify. Don't compare yourself with other people, but what do you identify with? You know, there's all different types of us. There are those social drinkers that may only be quasi-alcoholics, haven't crossed the line yet. There are those who are alcoholics that may only drink on holidays. I mean, there's all different types and categories of alcoholics, but it's about taking an honest look at myself for the very first time and looking for that one thing I have in common. When I take a drink, I'm looking for the very next drink. And he points out here, you know, when I started this program, I really was looking for a way out. I wanted a way out from always having the problems, the hangovers, the situations. But I also really kind of thought when I got here, I really would like to still be able to drink a little bit. But the doctor smashes that idea right on page 30 when he says, talks about that allergy in that last paragraph. The only relief we have is entire abstinence. Well, dang, I can't get around that. That's absolute abstinence. They say that's another one of the definitions of Alcoholics Anonymous and AA is that absolute abstinence. The one thing this book, and the only thing this book that I've been able to find in here that tells me about my alcohol is I have to stop putting it in. And then it's going to tell me throughout the rest of these pages exactly what I need to do so that that's possible. Because as it was said earlier, you know, I could stop, I just couldn't stay stopped. I kept going back to it. Even when my every fiber of my body did not want to drink, I would still go back to it and still find myself drinking. And the book now, as the doctor's identified exactly what's wrong with me, he's given me my problem. You know, the rest of this book is going to be outlined. Those 12 steps are to give me that solution. So it's so important. The doctor's opinion is at the beginning of the book, so that if you're thinking you may be one of us and want to join us on this way of walking life, that you're able to clearly look at your own life, find out where you're similar, what you have in common with us. And the doctor lays that out very clearly here, because otherwise many of us, we do die.
Okay, a little later in the book, it talks about alcohol being a symptom of the problem, a sign or an indication something else is wrong. So in the book, it talks about this: self-will, selfish, self-centered, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, and fear, a big one. And when I live like this, I become useless. If you're incarcerated and you have children, you already know what selfish is. Self-centered, I had a friend of mine say he was so self-centered that when the sun come up in the morning, it shined on him first. If there was any left, somebody's might have got some. Self-delusion, I lie to myself and I believe it. I believe my own crap. Self-seeking, even when I'm being nice, I'm looking for something, always with an ulterior motive. Self-pity, my sponsor said if you're sitting in your own crap, you're the only one that smells it. Don't sit in it because it's squishy and warm. And fear, the book says 100 forms of fear. But my biggest fears are losing something I have and not getting something I want. And when I live like that, I become useless. The 12 steps that help me go from that self-will to spiritual principles. Unselfish, putting the good of others ahead of oneself. Honesty. Honesty with me first, because if I'm lying to myself, how can I tell you the truth? I don't even know what it is. Purity is the opposite of self-seeking. Doing what I'm supposed to do without looking for anything back, no ulterior motive. And love is a feeling of brotherhood and goodwill toward other people. I don't have to like you, but I gotta love and respect. You got a purpose here just like me, and your purpose might be to show me what not to do, so I can learn from everybody. And when I live like this, I become useful. So this is like my decision board.